Du hører på bærekraftseventyr med Jørgensen og Pedersen.
Bli med på eventyrlig jakt på bærekraftig business.
Okay.
I denne episoden av bærekraftseventyr, Sveinung, så må vi vel bare konkludere med at det har vært en lang og god sommer.
Absolutt, men alt for lang pause fra podcasten.
Ja, det må vi ærlig innrømme, men vi er tilbake igjen nå, og det er jo alt som betyr noe. Her i vårt podcaststudio så står tida stille. Så det føltes som vi nettopp spilte til forrige episode, men her er vi. Og sist vi så hverandre her i podcaststudio, så var vi jo på vei til Roma.
Ja, vi veide cirka 20 kilo mindre, sånn totalt sett.
I snitt eller totalt?
Ja, det er noe med det landet der og mitt kosthold som ikke går helt ihop, men det er en helt annen sak.
Det er det. Vi var jo der da for en konferanse, New Business Models Conference 2020, hva var det vi nå? 2? Og vi fikk lov til å være med der sammen med gode kollegaer og lede en 2-dagers sesjon om Sustainable Business Model Experimentation. Det er jo et tema som kanskje snart fortjener en episode i denne serien, altså hvordan eksperimentere for mer bærekraftige forretningsmodeller, og der lærte vi jo at det jaggu skjer mye der ute.
Ja, absolutt. Og så var det jo gøy å møte gode kollegaer som vi har mekka en massive open online course sammen med, altså en gratis nettbasert kurs som vi har lansert i sommer.
Ja, der tok du en elegant liten segway inn i det som er temaet for denne episoden, fordi i det som dere snart skal få høre, så vil dere legge merke til at språket er internasjonalt. Vi snakker dog med en danske, så vi kunne jo som sagt ha snakket på norsk, men vi skal reposte nå en episode fra den internasjonale podcastserien vår Adventures in Sustainable Business, som vi spilte inn på forsommeren, fordi vi visste ikke helt da når denne MOOC-en, eller Massive Open Online Course, som du sa, skulle bli lansert. Det ble han på tampen av sommeren, på Coursera-plattformen, og da må jeg nesten inn her og sjekke, det er altså Coursera.org som er plattformen, og mange kjenner den som en av de store MOOC, eller mer generelt online undervisningsplattformene. Og denne MOOC-en, den har vi laget sammen med kollegaer fra veldig gode handelshøyskoler rundt i Europa.
Og det var nettopp de vi møtte på denne konferansen i sommer, og som du sa, altså, rundt dette med eksperimentering, rundt innovasjon, rundt å forstå både hva som er problemene, og prøve å komme litt nærmere hvordan i all verdens navn og rike er det vi skal løse dem. Og det er jo tema for denne MOOC-en også, altså den heter da Business Models for Sustainability. Så hvordan tenke forretningsmodeller som tar inn over seg de negative fotavtrykkene til virksomheten og forsøker å gjøre noe med det, og også da se på hvordan man kan kaste mer lys, skape mer positive ringvirkninger av virksomheten.
Og denne MOOC-en har vi utviklet sammen med, i tillegg da, Center for Sustainable Business på NHH oss selv, så har vi gode kollegaer fra Copenhagen Business School, Sustainability-avdelingen eller enheten der. Vi har Florian Lüdeke-Freund fra ESCP Business School i Berlin, og David Murillo fra ESADE Business Law School i Barcelona. Og alle disse mennesker er med på videoene som er en del av denne MOOC-en, som du kan følge gratis via Coursera. Du kan også kjøpe, kall det premiumversjon, hvor du sitter igjen med et sånt kursbevis ved slutten av MOOC-en. Og i episoden som vi snart skal sette over til, Sveinung, der snakker vi med en av disse personene, og vi må vel kunne kalle henne for primus motor i prosjektet.
Absolutt. Kirsti Reitan Andersen med norske røtter, men bosatt i Danmark, er også dansk. Hun er jo en av de primus motorene for dette programmet, og vi hadde en prat om med henne om hva dette programmet er, hvordan det er lagt opp, hva man kan lære, og også mer om bærekraftig business sånn generelt.
Så da setter vi over til den samtalen med Kirsti. In this episode of Adventures in Sustainable Business, we have exciting news. Because there is a new MOOC out in the world. And MOOC, of course, is an acronym for Massive Open Online Course. And this MOOC is called Business Models for Sustainability. And it is a joint collaboration between CBS, the Copenhagen Business School in Denmark, ESCP Berlin, ESADE Business School in Barcelona, and our Center for Sustainable Business at NHH, Norwegian School of Economics. We are very happy that the MOOC is now live on the Coursera platform. And with us today to talk about this MOOC, what it is, who it is for, what you can learn if you take it, and much more, is our good colleague and friend Kirsti Reitan Andersen, who is a postdoctoral researcher at CBS in Copenhagen. Welcome to Adventures in Sustainable Business, Kirsti.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation to come talk to you. I'm super excited for this.
So are we, and we've been working with this for a long time, collaborating on it for a long time. But Lars Jakob explained MOOC, but what is really a MOOC?
Well, a MOOC is, as I see it, is an amazing opportunity for us here at CBS and other universities to communicate our research to a much broader audience than who you would normally reach through writing academic articles. So it's a way of sharing our knowledge. It's a way of engaging people in conversations about the research. And also it's a way of, hopefully, in our case, because we do research on sustainable business models, it's a way of supporting industries to become more sustainable. If we look at the content itself, a MOOC is it's an online course. In this case, it consists of, I think, 6 or 7 modules. Each module has between 5 and 7 videos. One of our modules for this course is is quite extensive, so I think that one has something like 12 videos. They're pretty short videos, between 5 and 7 minutes usually, where we both present some theory around sustainable business models, but we also discuss and exemplify through cases a lot of the theory. So we get to meet a lot of practitioners working with sustainability who are willing to share with us both their successes, but also some of the challenges that they're facing in transforming their business models. So it's super exciting and it's very practical.
And there's a backdrop here. This isn't our first collaboration, Kirsti, on open teaching materials. We actually first met when 3 of the partners in this particular MOOC, so CBS, NHH, and ESADE, joined forces on an EU-funded project called Sustainable Business Models. And I'm sure that many of our listeners will be familiar with the sustbus.com website, where those videos are currently housed, if you will. So we have done this kind of thing before, filmed brief teaching videos and case videos on topics related to sustainable business models. And it was your idea, I believe, to take this one step further and to try to put it on the Coursera platform, which is one of several different platforms that provide MOOCs to the world. And they have millions and millions of users, these large platforms. Perhaps we could ask you, because you actually have some prior experience also offering materials on the Coursera platform with colleagues at CBS. You have done a MOOC previously on sustainable fashion. So before we dig into our own MOOC, could you tell us a little bit about your experiences doing that, and how was that process been so far?
Well, the first MOOC we did for Coursera took quite some time in development because it was our first course, and we needed to understand the format that Coursera offers. They have a quite nice setup that allows some flexibility, but they have a structure, and you need to deliver content into this structure. We've done a lot of research on sustainable fashion, sustainable business models for the fashion industry. So we developed this course, having a quite, I think, ambitious intentions for the content in terms of how it should look and how it should feel, and also, of course, for the content itself, but also a lot of investment going into the design of the course. We launched the course in November 2019, so now it's been online for a bit more than 2 years. And we should mention that, as we all know, the pandemic hit quite soon after we launched the course, and that's gave people time at home in front of their computers. But today, I think we have more than 42,000 learners globally on this one course, which is specific to the industry. And we're extremely excited about this. I've never had so many people reach out to me asking for more content, being excited about the course, wanting to discuss issues brought up in the course. We've also had, of course, ideas for how we could improve it. So we're actually right now in the process of editing the material a bit. So we'll do a relaunch of the course this summer. But it's an amazing way to kind of try to also formulate your research or communicate it in a different way than what you usually do being a researcher. We reach people outside of academia. It's mostly so Coursera has quite a good statistics on users, and we can tell that a lot of the people taking our course are practitioners working in the industry. We have quite a lot of that, and that's because of the Coursera platform. Coursera has a big audience in Asia and also South America, and a lot of the fashion industry actually takes place in Asia. So we have a lot of Indian learners on the platform, a lot of people working in production taking the course, which from our side is absolutely amazing, because it also, it opens up doors for having conversations that we otherwise wouldn't be able to have.
A student, I mean, thinking as a student, I would typically go to a university, enroll in a course, follow the lectures, do the exam, and get a paper that has some value. What is expected from a student doing a MOOC, and what does the student get or receive in return?
So with Coursera, I think the whole idea behind the platform originally was that highly qualified educational material should be available to everyone, so that education shouldn't depend on how much money you have. So that was the fundamental idea, and still is, I think. That means that basically by signing up for making a profile on Coursera, you have access to pretty much all their material, a lot of it at least. And you can take, for example, our sustainable fashion course, you can take that for free. The only thing you can't do if you don't pay is you don't do the final assignment. So all courses have some sort of final assignment that asks you in one way or other to kind of apply and discuss what the course has taken you through, and then you submit it, and then it's a peer-to-peer reviewing exercise. So you can the paper doesn't get a grade, but it gets accepted or not accepted, I guess, and then you can get a certificate. But that certificate you only get if you pay a small fee. I forget what it's, something like $20, I think. And if you don't have $20, you can actually apply with Coursera to get it for free if you don't have the money. So the whole Coursera platform is really kind of started from this idea of education should be available to everyone, which I think is absolutely amazing.
And since we are now officially collaborating with Coursera, I should be careful in saying what I'm about to say, but I want to take the student view. And I've actually been a student or a participant in these kinds of open access or MOOC courses, but that was actually on the edX platform. So I shouldn't say that out loud, but it's true. And this was when I was doing, or not really doing pedagogical training, but as a part of after having worked for many years as researchers, we are sometimes asked to sort of further build our pedagogical skills. And I actually spent the better part of a summer using my breakfasts doing pedagogical training on the edX platform. I did courses from Harvard, courses from the University of Texas, University of Queensland, And, if I see this from a sort of user's perspective, and of course I didn't need the paperwork, I think I paid for those certificates, but that wasn't the point. The point was getting, some new insights into how to design teaching activities in the classroom, how to think about what a good exam looks like, and stuff like that. And I have to say that I really, having been trained in a classical classroom, university setting, I really like this sort of self-paced learning that, if you have 7 minutes here to watch this video, then you do this follow-up assignment, like you said. You can choose, at least it's the case on edX, I think it's the same on Coursera, that you can choose whether or not you want to join in on more sort of communal exercises. If you want to, you can work together with learners from all over the world and have like almost colloquial sessions together. So there's something about the whole MOOC experience, and more broadly, this kind of online open access teaching material experience, that is really very, you can make it very tailor-made, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And you can use it for whichever purposes, if you're, already a tenured academic, or you're, beginning to learn something from scratch as a 17-year-old. It's there for you. You can choose how to engage with it, the depth with which you engage into it, and the degree to which you collaborate with others. So I think there's something about this, this freedom of choice, if you will, that really makes this MOOC experience attractive for a lot of different types of learners.
I think you're completely right, and I think the pandemic has also taught us that to do a lot of things online. So I think what was already a lot of people using it beforehand, but I think now, even more people are kind of tuned to these online learning settings. I'm a big fan of being in a classroom. I won't hide that, but I think the combination of the two, I think the online setting can give so much. And increasingly I know of people who basically learn entire new fields or skills having taken online courses, because some of the material there is quite amazing. YouTube, now we use Coursera, but you have people on YouTube who can teach you anything. So I think what Coursera maybe offers you that YouTube doesn't at the moment is that they have some guarantee of the material there. It's developed by people who know their field. So I think there they have an advantage, but the whole online learning experience and the opportunity to also discuss with others who work within the same field and have the same interests, I think online platforms are amazing in that sense.
A colleague of mine argues that knowledge is the only resource that increases in value when you share it. And this idea of a MOOC here, opening up, giving it knowledge away for free. And as a student, as I asked you earlier, typically you have to move to a city, and then you have to attend a university. You have to have good enough grades to get into the university, and it's a lot of competition to get in. I see now on the sustainable fashion platform that you had over 40,000 students already enrolled in that course, and you told us that you bring in students from all around the world. And this is it's kind of a democratization of knowledge in a way. And now this new course that we have created in business models for sustainability, I'm happy to be a part of that. I'm happy to be able to share that kind of knowledge to the world, because I find that very important. Sustainability is important, and the role of business, and it's not given to design sustainable business models. We have worked long enough with large and small companies all around the world to know that it is difficult. It's possible, but it's difficult. In episode 3 of Adventures, we had another sustainability adventure as a visitor, Nancy Bokken. She just wrote a paper together with her colleague that was called Unsustainable Business Models. And she started out with doing research on sustainable business models. And she said, and she told us in the podcast episode, she said that in the beginning, I thought it was kind of just showing people how to do it, and they would do it. And then after all these years, she said that, but they don't. And then she turned it upside down, and she wrote this paper, Unsustainable Business Models, showing then in different sectors all the sustainability problems that are there and that needs to be solved. And with this MOOC, I mean, there's a lot of work to be done out there globally. As you said, with the fashion industry, well, there's lots of problems related to the fashion industry, and it's great to share that knowledge with people around the whole world. So then the question is, what is the kind of the purpose here behind business models for sustainability? What do we want people to learn, Kirsti?
I think from my perspective, at least, and I think what runs throughout the course is this: I think we want people to engage in the discussion, right? We want to open up people's minds to discuss these things. And I think that, going back to Nancy Buchan, that I don't think the course is going to magically transform, everybody and get like, now I know how to do sustainability, because I don't think that's the case. But I think with the course, we can hopefully open the discussion. Florian Lüdeke-Freund, he's from ESCP, but he talks a lot about the value discussion, the shared value that's been around, that term has been around for a decade or so now, I guess. But the whole thing about bringing everybody into the conversation, I think what at least we experienced with the previous course, the sustainable fashion course, is that we now suddenly have people from pretty much across the value chain engaging in the course, which means that suddenly you can start having discussions about, what does sustainability mean for me? What does it mean for you? Can we find some shared can we find some shared way of working towards a more sustainable business model? And I'm not saying that the course is suddenly going to, be this tool where people start developing business models within it. But I think it can, through the conversations you can also have on the platform, through the many different people who had attended, I think you can, it's the knowledge is growing on the platform itself. And I guess that's what I'm hoping for.
And I like your word conversation here, and I think also from a content standpoint, this program is a real conversation of voices that don't necessarily align 100%. We've mentioned a couple of the names. Perhaps we should run through the list of people who are contributing to the MOOC. And from CBS, of course, it is yourself and your good colleague Esben Gjerdrum Pedersen, who is a professor at CBS. We've already mentioned Florian Lüdeke-Freund, who is a professor at ESCP Business School in Berlin, and who has been central in the field of business models for sustainability throughout his career for quite some time now. And then among our friends in Spain is the excellent David Murillo, who is perhaps most the right way to put it is that he works in the field of social innovation, and he works with business models in that space. And it's not necessarily the case that all of our perspectives are, they're certainly not completely overlapping. Perhaps sometimes we would even within this team disagree on several points related to business model design and business model innovation for sustainability. And perhaps that richness is also part of what brings value to this MOOC, that there's in some sense a multitude of voices, a multitude of perspectives on business models for sustainability, that we in some sense try to join forces under the same umbrella, if you will.
I completely agree. And I also just want to add to the list of participants our filmmaker, Ana Lucia Diaz Schiavon,
yes,
who is not only a filmmaker, but also deeply engaged in the content, and is an absolute expert out in helping us communicate research findings to a much broader audience. And also, she's been working within this field for so many years now and doing research. So she's also quite an expert on the content by now.
I'm looking at the list here over the videos, and there's so many interesting cases that have been made from Puma to Too Good to Go, Mud Jeans. Can you tell us a little about some of these cases?
I would love to. So if we start with Mud Jeans, for example, they're quite within the fashion industry. They're really interesting company in the sense that they have pretty much created their own circular business model. So they're basically, so what they do is basically they take their jeans that they have produced themselves, they take them back, and if they can't be fixed or sold as vintage jeans or redesigned in any way, then they send them to their shredder. They have a partner in the shredding factory in Spain who is then shredding the old jeans, and out of those old, shredded fibers, they create new jeans. It's a lot of detail in this process, but so they actually have a circular business model already up and running, which I think is super impressive and amazing because they've been front runners in this matter, and they're very willing to talk about their efforts and how they've come to the point they're at now. They're also willing to share some of the struggles they've had. So they're very kind and generous in that manner. I think what we've also done for this new course, which I think is quite interesting, is that we start talking not only about, so the last module, we basically lift the conversation not just to kind of just to a business model level, but talking more about systems. So the last module of the course is all about, how do we almost create movements that operate at system level. So circular economy, of course, need to operate at a system level, otherwise it will break down. But in this last module, we really kind of take the discussion more concrete and talk about financial systems, for example, the financial system for people who want to transform their business models to become more sustainable. They often face some struggles in terms of the economic system that is not really helping you transform your business model necessarily. It's more, it's creating a lot of stumble blocks often in terms of making profit on something that is a better choice for both the environment and for societies at large. So in the last module, we talked to a person from a investment company called Duland, based in Copenhagen. But they talk about, he can shares with us a lot about sustainable investment and how they, from this perspective, now see more and more investment going into sustainable companies, because in the long term, not necessarily in the short term, but in the long term, all statistics by now tend to show that sustainable, or companies that are starting to work with sustainability, where it's kind of integrated into their business models, will in the long term perform better.
There's something interesting here in this these different layers, if you will, of not just the business model concept, but also of how we understand, the business model and the performance dimensions of the business model. I'm trying to think back when we started doing the systbus.com platform. I don't know, must be more than 5 years ago now, something like that. We started the project, and at the time, looking back now in the rearview mirror, it seems a little bit not naive, but at the time, the business model, and specifically the sustainable business model conversation, had not come quite as far as it has today. And I very much like this. If we think at least three levels here of the business model in and of itself, which can be within a single organization or across organizational boundaries. Then, as you say, the second level of the business model ecosystems. So how different business models need to be seen in not just in tandem, but in some form of interaction. And I think that's absolutely true for sustainable business models, and in particular, perhaps for circular business models, which very often involve this kind of flow of resources and materials across organizational boundaries. And this is, of course, one of the subsets of topics that are covered in this book. And then this third level that you also mentioned, that, like Sveinung and I like to joke about, the society is really just a puzzle of many different business models put together. What is a city if not just a mix of a lot of business models? That's in its own right a naive picture, of course, but this idea that if you put many business models together, that together constitutes the bigger patchwork of a city, of a society, of a community. And this, systems level analysis then becomes its own question. And I think in this MOOC we don't manage to tie together all of those threads, but at least we're trying to address a little bit to those different levels of the conversation: the single business model and the single firm, the business model ecosystems, and then business models working together at the level of communities, societies, and systems and institutions.
I think actually we have a quite interesting example with, so we did an interview with Klaus Meyer, who is the head of, or he was part of the founders of the New Nordic Cuisine, and at least in a Danish context, in a Scandinavian context, I guess we could say a lot has happened to the food culture over the last 10, 15 years. Now we have spelt salads in 7-Eleven. That was not the case 10 years ago. So I'm just trying to say that they've created a movement that has immensely increased the value of locally produced food, having people pay attention to quality of food, which in a Danish context is, traditionally we haven't, I think we're still one of the countries in Europe who spent the least amount of money on, from what we have available on food, because traditionally we don't care apparently what goes into what our mouth and our bodies. But with this movement, and I call it a movement, he talks about it a bit as activism. They've completely changed the food scene in Denmark. I'm not saying, that now we all suddenly eat things we picked in the forest. That's not the case. But the awareness around what we eat, the awareness, the value given to locally produced food, to good food quality, has increased immensely and created, space for a lot of new business models to also grow, which I think is incredibly interesting.
I think what the three of us have in common is that we started working with sustainability and sustainable business models long before it was popular. It was rather unpopular at that time, and it was quite a struggle for us to find these cases, and it was also a struggle to get in contact with managers out there and start a real conversation about these important things. And what we see now is that practitioners, managers are coming to us to a larger degree. And we have executive courses. We have students today in big courses, and this is what they say they want to work with in the future. Yes, we're business students, but we want to work with sustainable business. And what we have seen over time is that getting a language, getting the concepts, understanding a few models can help companies turn from unsustainable business models at least to more sustainable business models. I have this, I'm a fanboy of Catherine Hayhoe, this climate scientist in the United States. And she says that the most important thing that we could do for climate is to talk about it. And I want to paraphrase that into sustainability and sustainable business, and say that the most important thing that we could do for sustainable business is to talk about it. And what better way than having a MOOC like this that is open, that is in that way democratic. You can go in there and you could spend your summer breakfasts, as if that's plural of breakfast, as Lars Jakob did last year with his lectures. What I'm trying to say is that here is an opportunity for people to go in an open platform and tap into that conversation, learn more about the models, start speaking to friends about it, start speaking to colleagues about it, start speaking to other companies, to their suppliers, and see, okay, what is the problem? As we also start out the MOOC, if you take a look at the first part of it, we ask, what is the problem? Why do we need sustainable business models in the first place? Well, it's because there's a lack of sustainable business models out there. At the same time, we know that there are things going on, and we could learn from the research that it has been done, and also from practitioners here. And what I like about this MOOC, business models for sustainability, is that it opens with a problem. It goes through some avenues here with innovation, as you said, with Florian Lüdeke-Freund. It takes a deeper look at the circular business models, this idea of a circular economy. And 20 years ago, when we finished our masters in business administration, there were no such thing. We didn't talk about circular economy or circular business models at all. But today we meet practitioners, we meet managers, and as you said with Mud Jeans, we meet companies who are trying to do this in practice. And we know from experience that when people start talking about this, well, there are things that they could do as well. And then it's the practices, and then it's the different types of sustainable business models, because they're not only circular business models. There's several avenues for companies who want to try to do this in practice. And then the last part, this ecosystem, as Lars Jakob said, all of these business models that have to work together, not only businesses but also the larger community, with the customers, with NGOs out there, with governments, and so on. So when I look at this, I'm pretty confident that a person out there, a student then, will be able to become a part of that conversation, and also be part of that transformation from unsustainable business models to sustainable business models.
I think I had this is not specifically related to this specific course, but so a couple of weeks ago I taught in class. I'm happy to be back in the classroom as well. But we have a sustainable business model course running, and I tried to bring up this fundamental question of what is sustainability for whom, in what context, that is what Florian in the MOOC is also talking about, the value, that you need to take this value discussion first. What are my values? What are your values? And how do we, not that values necessarily are good or sustainable, but if they are, how do we bring them into the company, and how do we align that? And what was interesting in this class that I taught a couple of weeks ago is that the students, it was pretty magical actually, because they were so excited to have these conversations, and they were like, this is so complex, this is so difficult, but it is so exciting. So it was quite fantastic to hear them have these conversations, and that's understanding that what is good for me is not necessarily good for the person who's in my supply chain somewhere, but how do we create something that's good for everyone who's kind of touched by the company? I think if this MOOC can also help people start having those conversations, I would be immensely happy.
And we are, after all, at a quite early stage in the in the history of the field of sustainable business models. So even though, like Sveinung said, the three of us and several of the other contributors to this MOOC, and of course many of our colleagues have been working on this topic for years and years, it is still quite fresh in business school curricula. There are absolutely not all business schools where you can find a course in sustainable business models. Some schools might have a corporate responsibility course or a broader sustainability course or whatever it might be. So I think that one of the real benefits also of this MOOC is that it can be a supplement for students, whether at bachelor level, master level, or executive for that matter, who want to supplement their studies in whatever it might be, strategy or marketing or finance or accounting, with specific materials on sustainable business models. And I think that the sort of building block design of a MOOC makes it also very applicable and usable for those kinds of purposes.
I fully agree. And I also hear a lot of people coming to us that they're seeking more information. Students going to business school who actually want more of this. So even though we need to fix things now, in my opinion at least, I think we also have generations to come who are, born with this to a much greater extent, that they want this information. And I think the business schools, in my opinion at least, the few I know of, are maybe a little slow in bringing this more. There is a request for it. So, but I think the business school is a massive system, and it needs transforming curriculums takes time. So it's not strange that this is taking time, but it's just students are asking for it, is my impression at least.
Making a MOOC also takes time, but we made it. Yes. It's there. You can find it on the Coursera platform. We didn't say, but the Coursera platform can be found on Coursera.org. Joining the platform is free. Accessing the courses is free. And like Kirsti said earlier, there are sort of premium models where if you want to have a certificate, there are payment models for that. But the entry cost here is very, very low. So we hope that all of our listeners will check out the course. Do also, of course, check out Kirsti's other course in sustainable fashion, because building blocks work well together here. So move from one to the other. And we hope that many of our listeners, their friends, their parents and grandparents and dogs and others want to check out this MOOC, which is now available on Coursera. Thank you very much, Kirsti, for joining us here on Adventures in Sustainable Business today to talk about and share insight about this MOOC. It's been a pleasure working with you so far in this process, and we look forward to working with you in the future as well.
Thanks to you. Thank you for the invitation.
You have listened to Adventures in Sustainable Business with Jørgensen and Pedersen.
Visit us at jørgensenpedersen.no, where you can find more information about this podcast and other information about our work. And if you like the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review.